What's up, guys? Matt Brown from the LSR Podcast. Thanks for joining me and Dustin and Adam right here on the channel each and every week. And while you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and let us know in the comments if there's anything you'd like us to tackle in a future episode. But without further ado, one of the things I really like about LSR, Adam, is the way that every now and then when something needs to be, something gets on your, on your chest or Brad's or whoever it might be, that you guys aren't afraid to go ahead and step up and write an op-ed, write an opinion piece here. It is majority news, and we are reporting the news, and it's just a factual site. But you'll mark something opinion. You'll write an opinion piece on how things are going on certain specific story within the industry. And this is what happened with you. And this is what happened with you looking kind of a little bit deeper into perhaps what Penn's responsibility should be in the whole Barstool thing. We questioned from the get-go that we thought it might be an odd marriage just for the fact that there is that controversial, not only past, but present with Barstool. And you kind of dug into that just a little bit further because it seems as if, at least to date, that Penn is just kind of like brushing things off to the side.
Matt, I appreciate that about LSR, and I would point back to, the origins of LSR. I mean, Dustin's been writing these types of columns for a long time, and we're just kind of keeping that legacy of covering the industry going. And in this situation, there just sometimes reaches a point where something needs to be said. And I would go back to the conversations that we've had on this podcast about Penn purchasing a 36% stake in Barstool. They have an option in the next 3 years to have half of Barstool. They have 2 seats of the 7 on Barstool's board. So when we saw in late June another flare up with some, I would not say old, but older videos of some offensive things from Barstool, we thought that it was only fair to ask Penn National, as a deeply invested company in the success of Barstool, whether or not Penn shared the same views as were being expressed. And as I said in the column, I don't think it's important that we talk about what specifically was being said. This is not a column that was here to drag Barstool. We know what Barstool is. They tell us who they are. They tell us who they were. They tell us who they are today. So this isn't about Barstool. It is what it is, and whatever your opinion is not likely to change anytime soon. This is about Penn National as a legacy gaming company coming into the sports betting space and taking on what we see to be a fair amount of risk in a company with the checkered history of Barstool, and not just buying in and saying, well, we want the customer information. They're taking the Barstool brand and slapping it onto their online sports betting product and saying, we want to be Barstool Sportsbook. So when we asked that question of Penn in late June, at first we didn't get an answer. We went back a few days later and to be very candid, said, look, this is a subject that we feel like needs to be written about. And so with or without your comment, we're going to be talking about this. And their response was to say, well, look at what Barstool said. That felt a bit insufficient. You are 30% of the company's board. You have chosen it as your brand. It feels like it's your responsibility to have an opinion as Penn National, as opposed to passing it off back onto Barstool. You can't be that deeply invested in Barstool as a company that is going to help build your value, as a company that is going to help build your stock price, and be able to, at times, wish away the parts of Barstool that you don't necessarily like or agree with. So a couple of weeks later, there was a conference online, the SBC Digital Summit, and Penn CEO Jay Snowden gave a long response to a question about Barstool. And you can read the column for that. I don't need to go into all of it, but it definitely seemed to try to whitewash or bleach what Barstool has been and what it is. And that's kind of the point where we say, that's not something that should be done. You should not be trying to rewrite the history or the present or the future of Barstool. You need to own what the investment is that you made. And you invested in a company that has a history of racism, xenophobia, misogyny, and a litany of problems baked into those greater issues. So the point that we're trying to make is that if you have chosen this as your brand, if you've chosen this as your way to get into this space, then there's a responsibility there, not just to yourself, but to everyone else who is invested in the success of this space, to be forthcoming, to take accountability, and to understand that there is no more separating what is Penn and what is Barstool. The Penn stock price is surging. And if you read any analysis, you see that a lot of that is on the hope that the Barstool Sportsbook app, which is due out on a slight delay in September, is going to have a great reach. 66 million, and I use this in air quotes, loyal fans of Barstool is something that is touted in Penn's company profile on its investor relations site. When you're that deep in, there's no more saying, talk to Barstool. It's your turn.
Yeah, and Dustin, when you take a look at this, I mean, we see just general sponsorships where a brand has bought into an athlete or a company or whatever it might be, and things go south, and they'll either punt or they'll make a statement or they'll do whatever. And this is like an actual business relationship we're talking about here. We're talking about ownership stake in all of this. So like when company X, Y, or Z sponsors an athlete and an athlete does something ridiculous and they make a comment, they say, hey, we don't stand for there. We don't like this, or we're dropping this guy because of this, whatever it might be. This is a far deeper relationship than even a sponsorship type deal. And so to always just say, yeah, we're just kind of rolling. We're just kind of going with the flow here. Talk to Barstool. They're on top of all this. It does seem like a little bit odd of a position to take, especially when, as we just assume is going to happen, they're going to own half the company, and then there's another option for them to own the majority of the company, if not all of the company, down the line. So it seems like you'd kind of start, if you did have a problem with anything that was going on or whatever, you'd have at least an opinion of this company that you are at least going to own half of and maybe the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not super visible yet. I mean, it's visible for us because we follow the space, but this Barstool-Penn relationship kind of simmering in the background. Until the app launches in Pennsylvania next month, we don't have a whole lot of sense of what it's going to be. But Penn bought Barstool, make no mistake, for the brand and for its access to Barstool fans. This is not some, like, you could even pass it off like, oh, we took a minority stake, we're just interested in Barstool. That's not what they did. They took an interest in Barstool to push that as their brand for sports betting. I think I totally agree with Adam that you have to take ownership of what you've done here and what you and your relationship with Barstool. It's not like this thing over here. This is tied up in your identity now. Now, Penn National doesn't have a huge identity. It's a large gaming company that has lots of casinos across the country, but doesn't really have probably fairly vanilla in terms of what people think of it in terms of brand. But now you have this brand. This is your brand. This is your brand for sports betting, and presumably for online casino when it goes live as well. So yeah, you just can't wash your hands of it. I think that's what Adam's point here is. And again, you can agree or disagree with Barstool, like or not like Barstool. We're just asking for some accountability from Penn National.
That's exactly where I was going with this. This isn't and Adam, I just want you to kind of restate this here, because I think there was some, probably people didn't read the article in the first place. They just read headlines and move on and make instant judgment here. But I think there was some misinterpretation going on here, that this was like an anti-Barstool piece where it's not all you did basically, you were literally just citing things that had already been written at other places. I mean, this, like you said, we're not opening the book here on what goes on over at Barstool or anything like that. Your biggest question here was more the Penn side of everything, where it seems like there were people kind of coming out of the woodwork and like, why you gotta always have stuff against Barstool? And why it's like, no, that's like the smaller part of the story here.
Absolutely, Matt. We don't need to tell you what to think about Barstool. You can make up your own mind there. I think it's pretty clear what the history is, and we listed out the facts. Yes, there was a point in the column where we kind of summed up some of what I thought were evasive and potentially leading astray comments made by the Barstool executives, because Penn had said, look at what the Barstool executives' response was to this situation. But this is about a gaming company in the sports betting space looking at this brand, looking at the history of this brand, and let's be very clear, the present of this brand. This is not just about what happened years ago, because both Jay Snowden and Dave Portnoy from Barstool and Eric Nardini, the CEO, discussed jokes and the idea of comedy in their past and saying, well, not every joke lands. First of all, jokes don't excuse it. Second of all, this didn't stop X number of years ago. This is still the company's identity to this day. So you can't just say that's who Barstool used to be if you're on the Penn side of things. The other thing that I would point out, Matt, when we talk about this discussion is that, some people were saying on social media, well, why doesn't Fox Bet have to excuse Fox News? That's not the same situation. Penn looked at Barstool as a separate company and chose to not only invest in it, but to absorb it and to profit from it. Fox News, Fox Bet, they're two companies under the same umbrella that have nothing to do with each other, who frankly have separate ownership. So this is about, in the time that we're in now, but frankly in any time, needing to stand up and say, this is what we think. Not saying, look to Barstool. Not saying, well, we got comfortable with them and you need to understand that they made some jokes in the past. No. This is a time when you need to say very explicitly, very clearly to your investors, to your employees, and to everyone else who is in this space at the same time as you, what your opinion is of this company that you've taken on. Because as we know about bad actors in any space, it doesn't take more than one to catch the attention of regulators. And if Barstool again steps over a line, which is more likely than not, and draws the attention of regulators, it's not just going to affect Penn, it's not just going to affect Barstool, it's going to affect everybody in the industry.
And to put a bow on this, and to be fair, when Fox Bet announced the whole partnership with Fox and some of the things that they were going to be doing, we definitely questioned plastering a guy like Clay Travis's face on your brand and stuff. We brought that up. I mean, a guy that uses race baits and does all the different things to pander to his following as well. And we brought that up and we talked about that. That being said, he is just one entity in this other larger deal where Barstool is the overriding brand, and Portnoy is the unquestioned face of Barstool Sports, whereas Clay Travis is a part of Fox Sports, but is certainly, no one would ever say the poster boy, no one would ever say the spokesperson or anything like that. So we did bring all of that up as well with the Fox side of things. So I think that also is something we should say,
No, I think that's a fair statement, Matt. And, I know we're going to get into talking about this in a second, but Penn's stock price right now is surging. And it is surging, as I said, on the back of Barstool. And you are getting even deeper into this relationship than you were before when we first were talking about this we first talked about this early in the year. But when I first started asking about this in late June, you are now in a much different place where the profit is right out there for everyone to see. And at that point, you got to speak up.
Guys, as a reminder, the full version of this podcast can be found over at LegalSportsReport.com, as can the written breakdown of every topic we talk about on the show each and every week. Thanks for watching.